"Are you jumping today?" one of the other pilots asked me. Our squadron walks along the path next to the river that twists and turns through the city of Cadmus. At one spot in the river down near City Hall, the river becomes a series of falls. A gray heron slides through the swift water near us. "No," I say, not bothering to hide the irritation in my voice. "I don't see the point of it." "It's a sign of unity," he says. I turn to look at him a little more closely. "We all work for the rising, don't we?" I ask. "Isn't that all the unity we need?" The pilot, Luke, falls silent and walks a little faster, so that I'm alone at the back of our group. We've been given a few hours off. Everyone wanted to go see the city. For many of us, it feels dangerous and exhilarating to walk freely through the streets of a city that used to be society. Even though the Rising has had full power at Cadmus for some weeks now. As expected, Cadmus was the first and easiest providence for the Rising to take over. So many insurgents lived and worked here. Indy falls back to walk with me. "You should jump," she says. "They'll all want you to do it." Some of the other squadron have started jumping into the river. Though it's officially spring now, the water comes down from the mountain and it's frigid. I have no plan to go into the river. I'm not a coward, but I'm also not stupid. This isn't safe. Warm blue pool of the borough. After Cyprus and what happened when Vic died, I don't trust the water anymore. Many people walk the river path today. The sun feels warm on our backs. The Rising has asked everyone to keep to their society-assigned jobs for now until the plague has fully contained. So most people are at work, but still there are childcare providers bringing little kids to throw stones into the river, and workers with foilware trays enjoying new freedom of eating their lunch wherever they want. All of these people must be immune or cured so to walk so freely. They're like us. They know they're safe. I glance at the barricade wall, which also runs near the river. Even though the Rising is firmly in control, there are still restrictions for now as to where we can go. The medics and workers behind the walls can't come out. They eat the sleep and breathe the plague. Cassia told me that Alexander sided to Cadmus. It's strange that he might be on the other side of the barricade, working in the medical center. Our paths haven't crossed in Cadmus, though. We've both been here for months. I wish I had seen Alexander. I'd like to talk to him. I'd be interested to hear what he thinks of the Rising. If he's found it everything he hoped it would be. I don't wonder if he still loves Cassia. I'm sure he does. I haven't heard anything from her since the plague broke. But they've immunized everyone in the Rising who wasn't already immune. So I think she's safe, one way or another, but I don't know. I sent her a message as soon as I could, telling her how sorry I was I couldn't reach her that night at the lake. I asked her if she was alright and told her I loved her. I traded 4 of my foilware pilot meals for that, and it was worth it, though I can't do it too often, or I'll get in trouble. The silence from Cassia is making me crazy. Every time I fly, I have to keep myself from taking off and risking everything to try to get to her. Even if I manage to steal a ship, the Rising will shoot me down. You won't do her any good if you're dead, I remind myself. But I'm not doing her much good by staying alive either. I don't know how much longer I can wait before I have to risk it. "Why not jump?" Indy asks, still needling at me. "You can swim." "What about you? Are you going in?" I ask Indy. "Maybe," Indy says, everyone still a little perplexed by Indy. But more and more they also respect her. It's not hard to do so after you've seen her fly. I'm about to say something more to her, but then I recognize a face in the crowd. One of the traders who used to bring me notes from Cassia. I haven't seen this particular trader in a long time. Does she have something for me today? The way the archivist trade is different now. The Horizon closed down Society's museums, saying that they were filled with nothing more than propaganda. So we have to wait outside the museum and make contact or find each other in the crowds. The handoff was quick, as usual. She passed me, keeping her gaze level and cool. We bump into each other slightly, jostling normal on a crowded path. From the outside, I'm sure it all looks perfectly natural. But she handed off something to me, a message. I'm sorry, she says, meeting my eyes briefly. I'm late. She's acting as if she bumped into me because she's in a hurry to get somewhere, to be on time. But I know what she means. The message is late. Likely because she had the plague. How did she manage to hold on to the paper? Did anyone else read it while she was still? My heart raced like a rabbit in search of cover out of the plateau. This note had to be from Cassia. No one else has ever sent me anything. I wish I could read it now, but I'll have to wait until it's safe. If you could fly anywhere, where would you go? Indy asks. I think you know the answer to that, I tell her. I slip the paper into my pocket. Central, then, Indy says. You'd fly to Central. Wherever Cassia is. Caleb looks back at us, and I wonder if he saw the exchange. I doubt it. The trader was fast. I can't figure Caleb out. He's the only one who brings cases back when we were dropping off the cure. None of other ships are taking on cargo. Commander always tells us it's approved. But I think there's more going on than we know. I think Caleb has been assigned to work with Indy and me to watch one of us. But I can't figure out which of us it is. Maybe both. What about you? I asked Indy, keeping a light tone. If you could fly anywhere, where would you go? Back to Sonoma? No, she says, as if the suggestion was ridiculous. I wouldn't go back to where I'm from. I'd go someplace I've never been. My fingers close around the paper in my pocket. Cassia told me that she wears the same pages against her skin. This is the closest I've come to touching or seeing her right now. Indy watches me. And then, as she often does, she says something disconcerting, unexpected. She leans closer and speaks so quietly that the others can't hear. I've been wanting to ask you, why didn't you steal any of the tubes when we were in the cavern? I saw Cassia and Eli each take one, but you didn't. Indy's right, I didn't take a tube. But Cassia and Eli both did. Cassia took her grandfather's tube and Eli stole one that had belonged to Vic. Later, both Cassia and Eli gave me their tubes for safekeeping. I hid them in the tree near the stream that led to the rising camp. I didn't need one, I say. Indy and I stop. The rest of the group shouts and hollers, but they found a spot where they want to jump, a deep place downriver from one of the falls. It was where the other squadrons have been going in and close enough to the path that people can stop and watch. Come on, calls out Connor, one of the other pilots. He looks right at Indy and me. You afraid? He asks. I don't bother to answer. Connor's contempt, arrogant, and mediocre. He thinks he's a leader. I know he's not. No, Indy says, and right then she slips off her uniform down to a fitted undershirt and shorts that we all wear and takes a running leap into the water. Everyone cheers as she hits the surface. I catch my breath thinking of how cold it must be. And then I'm thinking of Cassia and long ago day in Oria when she jumped into the warm blue pool. Indy breaks to the surface, wet and laughing and shivering. Even though she's beautiful with certain wildness in her eye, I can't help but think I wish Cassia was here. Indy sees it. A little of the light in her eyes disappears as she looks away from me and pulls herself from the river. Reaching for her uniform and slapping hands with the others, someone else jumps in and the crowd hollers again. Indy shivers, wringing out her long hair. I think I have to stop this. I don't have to love Indy the way I do Cassia. But I do have to stop thinking about Cassia when I look at Indy. I know how it feels when people look right through you, or worse, see you as something or someone other than who you are. A formation of airships flies overhead and we glance at the sky, a reflex now that we spent so much time there. Indy climbs up one of the rocks next to the river and watches the others jump in. She leans her head back and closes her eyes. She reminds me of one of the other little lizards in the Outer Providence. They might look lazy, but if you try to catch them, they'll run away fast as the lightning that breaks in the desert sky before a summer thunderstorm. I climbed up next to her and watched the river, all the things that float and swim along, birds, debris from the mountains. You could build a dozen boats from everything and race past in an hour or two, especially in the spring. I wonder if they'll ever let either of you fly on your own, Connor says. His voice is loud, of course, so that everyone else can hear, and he comes closer, trying to intimidate us. He's huge and hulking, at least 6'3". I'm only 6 feet even, but much faster, so I'm not worried about a fight. He won't catch Indy or me if we decide we need to run. Seems like the pilot always has the two of you paired up. Like he doesn't think either of you can fly without the other. Indy laughs out loud. That's ridiculous, she says. The pilot knows I can fly alone. Maybe, Connor says. He's so easy to read. The dirty things he reads to say obvious before he can even spit it out. The reason he has the two of you fly together is because you're the best, Indy says. Of course we are. Indy laughs. Connor laughs. Water drips off him from his jump into the river. He looks soaked and stupid, not fine and shining like Indy. You think a lot of yourself, he says. You think you'll be the pilot one day? He glances over his shoulder to see if the others are all laughing too, and how ridiculous this is. But everyone stays quiet. Of course, Indy says, as if she can't believe he'd even ask. We all hope for that. A girl named Ray says, why not? We can dream now. But not you, Indy says to Connor. You need a different dream. You're not good enough to be the pilot, and don't think you ever will be. Really, he says, leaning in, sneer on his face. And how do you know that? Because I've flown with you, she says, and you've never given in to the sky. Connor laughs and starts to say something, but Indy keeps talking over him. You're always thinking about yourself, how it looks, what you're doing, who will notice. Connor turns away from her. Over his shoulder he says something crude about Indy, but what he'd do to her with her if she weren't crazy. I start after him. It doesn't matter, Indy says, her tone perfectly unconcerned. I want to tell her that it's dangerous to be so oblivious with people like Connor. But would it do any good? The fun's over. People start back to the camp for dry clothes. Some of the pilots and runners shivering as they walk. Almost everyone went into the river. As we walk, Indy begins to braid her long, wet hair. What if you could bring back anyone who's gone? She asked, keeping her line of questioning from before. And don't say Cassia, she adds with a little huff of impatience. She doesn't count. She's not dead. It feels good to hear Indy say that, even though, of course, she doesn't know for certain. Although Lucia sent me a message, that's a good thing. I close my fingers around the paper again and smile. Who would I bring back from the dead? I ask Indy. Why would you ask something like that? Indy presses her lips together for a moment, and I think she's not going to answer. But then she says, anything is possible now. You think the Rising might be able to do what the Society never could? I ask. You think the Rising has figured out a way to bring people back to life? Not yet, she says. But don't you think that will be someday? Don't you think that the pilot's ultimate purpose in the old stories and songs about him saving us, it might not just mean from society or the plague, but from death itself? No, I speak low. You saw those samples in the carving. How could you bring anyone back like from that? And even if you could use the sample to create someone a lot like the original person, it would never be the person themselves. You can't bring anyone back, ever. Do you see what I mean? Indy shakes her head stubborn. Right then I feel a push on my back, shoving me off balance towards the river nearby. I have barely enough time to reach my hand out into my pocket and close my fingers around the paper before I hit the water. I hold my hand up high and push off to the bottom of the river as hard as I can with my feet. I know the paper is still wet. Others think my fist is raised in some kind of salute, so they start cheering and calling out and raising theirs back. I have to play it off, so I call out the rising and they all pick up the cry. I'm certain it was Connor who pushed me. He watched from the shore with his arms folded. Cadmus River runs near our camp too. As soon as the others are out of sight changing their clothes in the barracks, I run down to a flat stone at the edge of the water and unfold the paper as I go. If he ruined her message to me. Part of the writing on the bottom is ruined. My heart sinks. Most of it is legible. It's written in Cassia's handwriting, so I know it anywhere. She changed her code a little, the way she always does, but it doesn't take long to puzzle it out. I'm fine, but most of my papers were stolen. So don't worry if you don't hear from me as often. I'll find a way to you as soon as I can. I have a plan. Kai, I know that you're going to want to come find me, that you're going to want to save me. I need you to trust me to save myself. Spring is coming. I can feel it. I still sort and wait, but I've been writing letters everywhere I can. I was right. The message is old, and the plague has spread things up and slowed others down. Trading isn't as reliable as it used to be. How many weeks ago did she write this? 1 week after the plague arrived? 2? Did she ever get my message, or is it sitting in the pocket of someone lying in the medical center? Sometimes when I feel that it isn't fair that we're telling each other our stories in bits and pieces again, I remind myself that we are luckier than most because we can write to each other. That gift is first of many you've given to me, means more to me each day. We have to have a way to keep in touch until we can be together again. I love you, Kai. That's how her always ends her message to each other. But there's more this time. I can't afford to send 2 separate messages all the way to Cadmus. I haven't asked you of this to you before. I tried to talk to him in different ways so that the two of you won't have to share. But can you find a way for Xander to see this too? The next part is for him, and it's important. That's when I see the code switch into numbers, pathway down the page. It looks like basic numerical code. Near the bottom of the page, it blurs in waves of ink on the paper from when I fell into the river. I'm tempted to decipher it. I know I could, but she thinks she can trust me. She can. I won't ever forget the way she looked at me in the little house in the carving when she realized I'd hidden the map to the rising from her. I promised myself that I wouldn't let fear make me into someone I didn't want to be. Now I'm someone who can trust and be trusted. I have to find a way to get this message to Xander, even if it's incomplete. And even if giving it to him makes it look like I'm untrustworthy because I'm part of it is ruined. I pin the paper down flat on the stone with a small rock so that the wind can pull the water from the page. It won't take long for the message to dry, hopefully, and others won't miss me. When I turn back, I see Indy walking across the rocks. She's changed into a dry uniform and she sits down next to me. I keep one hand on the corner of the paper, afraid to let go, in case the wind picks it up and sends a message sailing. For once, Indy doesn't say anything, doesn't ask any questions. So I do. What's the secret? I ask Indy. She looks at me and raises an eyebrow. What do you mean? What's the secret of flying like you do? I ask. Like the time when we were landing, gear malfunction and you brought the ship in fine. We scraped along the asphalt of the runway and the ship's metal belly sending up sparks, and Indy hadn't seemed flustered at all. I know how space fits together, she says. When I look at things, they make sense to me. She's right, she always had a good sense of proportions and the positions when it comes to concrete objects. She carried a wasp's nest because she liked the way it fit together. When she climbed the walls of the canyon, she made it look easy. But still, excellent spatial reasoning alone isn't even a practical intuition in the way it is for her. It doesn't account for how good she is at flying and how fast she learned. I'm not bad myself, but I'm nothing like Indy. I know how things move, she says like that. She points to another heron over the water. This one skims along the river, wings outstretched, following a current of air as long as it lasts. I look at Indy and feel a sharp ache and loneliness for her. She's like the bird. She knows how to fit things together and how to move, but so few people understand her. She's the most solitary person I've ever known. Has it always been that way? Indy, I ask. Did you take a tube from the cavern? Of course, she says. How many? I ask. Only one. Who? Just someone, Indy says. Where did you hide it? I didn't keep it for long. We got lost in the water when we went down the stream to the rising. She's not telling the whole truth. I can't tell where the lie comes in, but there's no way to get Indy to talk about something when she decided to keep her own counsel. You and Hunter are the only ones who didn't, Indy says. Take one of the tubes, I mean. Of course, because Hunter and I accept the truth of death. I've seen people die, I tell Indy. So have you. When they're dead, they're gone. You can't bring them back. We are the ones who are alive, here with everything to lose. What if you need to get something over the wall of the barricade? I asked Indy, changing the subject. Would you say that's impossible? Of course not, she says. Just like I knew she would. There's lots of ways to do it. Like what? I ask. I'm grinning. I can't help it. Climb, Indy says. They'll see us. Not if we're fast, Indy tells me. Or we could fly. They'll catch us for sure that way. Not if it's the pilot who sends us in, she says.